Hello everyone, Jess with Emotional Fire Academy here to talk about today about how to control emotions in love as a highly sensitive person. Ooh, loaded topic today. I'm going to get pretty personal and vulnerable with this. So make sure to stay tuned to the end to get all of the juicy tidbits I'm going to provide in the middle. And make sure to subscribe to my channel. I put out new videos every week about what it's like to be a highly sensitive person and who am I. I am your driver operator on this journey. I help highly sensitive people up-level emotionally in life. I'm a former firefighter and an emotion coach. So let's dive right in. So we're going to get a little bit of philosophical, today, philosophical. And let's take a step back and kind of position ourselves, right? So if you are watching this video and you're having a problem with emotions in love in a relationship, essentially we're going to refer to the middle here. You're here. You are here. You're the purple dot in the middle. And as Einstein said, we can't be in the same energy of the problem as we can of the solution. And so when we're trying to problem solve, emotional control in relationships, we either need to zoom out or we need to zoom in. And either one of those kind of totally changes our perspective, right? We go from standing where we are with our current perspective of having an issue to either zooming out or zooming into ourselves or the problem, and that gives us a totally different point of view. Now, think of it like, say you are standing in front of a fire, and it looks like a large fire, maybe it's a bonfire, and you change your position. That's like, okay, you're right here, you're looking at the fire. If you zoom out, if you go climb up a hill and you look at the fire from the hill, it's much smaller than you thought, right? You get a different perspective on how, what the scope is of the problem. If you zoom in, you also get a different perspective, right? If you climb into that fire, you're totally going to get a different perspective as well. So, and it's going to, so just in emotionally, intellectually zooming out and in from a problem is how we can shift our perspective. And that's what we're looking for when we have an issue. So and I'm going to share today some of essentially my transformation from standing here in a really bad toxic relationship to moving into one that was much, much healthier for me. And so, gosh, I'm feeling really vulnerable sharing all this, but I'm going to do it anyway because I think you're going to find it super valuable. So essentially, let's start with zooming out because this is where I started. When I spent 8 years in a relationship that was really not healthy for me. And so when I started to zoom out and in of this relationship and have some huge realizations, that's when I finally essentially shook loose of the problem and was able to shift. And so some of the first realizations I had because when you're in the midst of a problem, sometimes it's hard to understand what's happening. And so zooming out, when we talk about zooming out of a problem, we're zooming out, we're looking at our metacognition. So we're taking a step back, we're looking at the overarching problem, the patterns that are coming up. And so if you're having problems emotionally controlling yourself in this relationship, one of the first things you can do that you might actually be able to see is zoom out. Start looking at, essentially these are kind of red flags, right? These are things that aren't healthy. And this comes from neuro-linguistic programming, of which I'm a practitioner. And one of the first things, realizations, light bulbs that I had when I was standing in the midst of this relationship, which felt amazing at its highs and really, really, really bad at its lows, was this diagram right here. This first helped me. This little guy or girl looking at their love interest. And so I have described this in other relationship videos. It's super important because ideally we should perceive ourselves as standing on the same equal footing as the person we're with, our partner, boyfriend, girlfriend, lover. And so ideally that would be where we would want to be. Often that's not what happens. And either we end up putting them on a platform, elevating them above ourselves, which was what I was doing, or putting them below us. And we're always kind of looking down, blaming them for stuff. And so it's when we're putting this person intellectually in a higher or lower position than us that causes a lot of these problematic emotions. And so one of the keys to this, and I'm going to say it twice because I really want it to sink in, again, is metacognition. So ask yourself, why do you elevate this person? Recognizing, okay, I am elevating this person, I'm putting them above me. Why do you do that? What do you believe about how things should work in life that you would put someone above or below you? Again, what do you believe about how life works, about how relationships are supposed to work, about your expectations for the other person, that you're chronically putting them above or below yourself? This is a really important question. For me, I was raised, my mother, God bless her, she's amazing. What I perceived is growing up, she and my father, she kind of melted into him. I didn't see her having a lot of her own interests, and just kind of taking care of all of us. She was so nurturing and so loving. And so I kind of subconsciously learned that the other person's needs kind of come above my own because this had been modeled. If I had grown up in a different family, I might have seen something different. And I'm not blaming my parents. I love them immensely. But I think just as children, whatever our model is for relationships, that's what we ourselves are going to take as our starting point, right? That's what's going to be here. This is our natural inclination. It's what we're used to. It's comfortable. It's familiar. And so for me, it was always like, okay, well, the other person's needs come above mine. This kind of, serving them, waiting on them, loving them, taking care of them, nurturing them to an extreme. And so where did that leave me? So that left me essentially elevating someone for a really long time that I probably shouldn't have, putting his needs, which fundamentally did not jive with my own, above me. And so, when we're looking at these bigger patterns in our relationships that are causing emotional problems, it's like, whoa, it's no wonder I always feel less than him. I always feel unworthy. I always feel like he's more important and he gets his way and it's always him and never me. And that resentment, that anger, and that disappointment is what I felt. I was constantly dealing with that. So realizing that not only is the situation that you might be in, it might be uneven. It might be not on stable, even ground where both people's needs are met. Both people are responsible for their own emotions. It might be totally imbalanced. Like, what position are you putting this person in? Or do you feel that you yourself are in? Are you above or below this person? So when I saw that, it was probably a good 6 to 8 months before I ended the relationship, because I realized, I was like, I am elevating this person just on an intellectual level, and that's not good for me. And that's causing a lot of the negative emotions that I'm feeling in this relationship. And unless I actively work, to get on level playing ground with this person, which I realized I couldn't do that. I just wasn't, it just wouldn't work that way. Our dynamic. And so realize, what position are you playing with this? Another bigger pattern we might be able to recognize when we're having a lot of problems is, what role are we playing? Roles are based on archetypes. They're based on stories, right? Life is chaotic. It's busy. We just sometimes tend to fall into these patterns of behavior that are either expected of us or, again, that are familiar, and we're not even awake to them. We're not even paying attention to them. And so, and some of these roles or stories or narratives or, characters that we're playing with this person, we could be feeling like the victim. I constantly felt victimized in this old relationship. I was constantly feeling like things were being done to me, which caused a lot of emotional turmoil. And then because of that, I made him the bad guy. He was the bad guy. He was doing this to me constantly. I felt like he was doing this to me. There's also the dynamic of being the hero. If somebody's always saving you, or you are always saving someone else from themselves, these are all dysfunctional roles you could be taking on. So if you start to see in your patterns some of these positions or roles that you're playing, that again is a flag that maybe, there needs to be some change in either how you're relating to that person, how you're relating to yourself. Because if you tend to, again, embody one of these roles consistently, you're going to attract someone who will play one of the other roles. And then the two of you will cycle and cycle. So, and these were some of the things, again, that I started to realize that I was like, wow, okay, how can I change? What can I do to change these things? Having a really frank conversation with your partner is a good place to start. If you have that openness and trust, talk about, I always feel like the victim and I'm blaming you for that, and be really open and honest and see what happens. Because ultimately, when we have a problem, right, something needs to change. Either it's us on the inside or us on the outside. So the actions that need to be taken to change a situation. And so the metacognition is kind of changing ourselves from the outside in, right? Taking action to maybe leave the relationship. Because you realize you and this person are always going to be stuck in these roles. It takes a lot to overcome them. You can do them. But, naturally, if you're just playing them out and it's over and over again, this is how people get stuck in the same positions year after year after year with partners, and then suffer that burn up of emotion that happens from playing these roles or putting this person in a position. And so, if we zoom in, so that was zooming out. If we want to zoom in, we want to zoom in closer to the, kind of change our perspective from the inside, take a different look at things, take a little bit more responsibility for ourselves. Essentially what we're doing, again, is taking responsibility. And so zooming in is more about introspecting, really taking control of yourself, because that is what you have control of every day, is yourself, your body, your mind, your soul. You can take responsibility for that. And as you take responsibility, you empower yourself. Because again, people who don't feel responsibility for themselves, who feel like a victim of circumstance, are playing the victim role and will end up in circular patterns with heroes or bad guys. And so, or even another victim where you're both feeling victimized all the time. And so going within is changing our perspective so that we can get out of the problem. We can solve our problem, our emotional problems, with the one that we love. So by taking responsibility for just us, I can take responsibility for me. You again you're starting to shift your perspective on the issue because you're getting to know yourself better. You're taking responsibility. We empower ourselves this way, and we don't feel stuck, because then we can do things for ourselves, right? We can take steps for ourselves to do things differently. And so, there's a good quote saying, "In understanding myself, I understand you more." And that is exactly true. When we really know ourselves and where our boundaries and our limitations and our triggers are, when we know ourselves that deeply, we totally get the other person, and we totally understand the dynamic of what that other person is bringing to us and why it is making us react. And so introspection, again, a great way to move from, you're here, to moving out and getting a different perspective on your emotional issues with someone that you love. I refer to the emotional triangle. I mention this in pretty much every video. It is the basis of my coaching program. So, emotion obviously is like the fire in the middle. It blazes up when we have a combination of language, physiology, and conditioning kind of all coming together and causing the emotion. So, as we learn, as we introspect on ourselves, and we can take control of these things, we can start to eat better. We can start to unravel our conditioning, because what the mind can create, it can also uncreate. And then we can change our language. Language change was what broke me away from the guy I was with. I was able to leverage that to really take a step forward. And so managing that for ourselves, it puts the responsibility in our own hands of, okay, I feel this. I am responsible for my emotions in this relationship, and I'm not going to put them on you. Ideally it would be no matter what you do, I'm going to be happy and fulfilled and satisfied. In an ideal world, yeah, that might work. But in a non-ideal, in reality, it takes a lot of work to get to that point. It is possible, but it takes a lot of work to get there. A lot of introspection, taking control of, eating well, taking care of yourself, managing all these aspects so that your emotional fires are not fires. They're just coals, that kind of flare up occasionally. You can put them out on your own, and you don't look to this other person to do it for you, to save you, or you don't blame the other person for stoking the fire. And so the more you manage yourself, the more you naturally have control of your emotions in a relationship, because you're 50% of that. And so essentially at the end of the day, right, it comes down to how can we actually do this? What does this look like practically to control emotions in love as a highly sensitive person? What I would recommend is starting with, what do you know for sure? What do you know for sure of these bigger patterns of what you believe about yourself, how you're feeling in this relationship? It could be, I feel upset all the time. I feel like my needs aren't being met. Write down what you know for sure about this relationship. That is the truth for you, truth with the capital T. And that's a great place to start, because writing it down and taking an objective look at it, then you can zoom out or in and say, okay, how am I going to deal with this? Because ultimately, what we need to do is enact change. Because if we're standing here in our problem, and we need to enact change, we either need to make changes to the relationship where we're strong enough to leave, because the things that we believe about relationships, we believe that they should be equal, and the other person refuses to take an equal footing with us. They always want to blame, or we feel ourselves always wanting to blame the other person, right? Because we can be just, from a different perspective, we might be as just as much to blame as they are, and that's part of taking responsibility. I totally admit the amount of toxicity that I brought to the last relationship. I was 50% of the problem, and he was 50% of the problem. And together we created these cycles of dysfunction together. I could have left. I could have made it, shortened the time that I was with him from 8 years to 8 months to 8 days if I had been true to myself and what my what my beliefs about how relationships should work. If I was true to that, and that sometimes is what takes the change, is being truer to your own beliefs and believing in them enough to leave, and that takes a lot of strength. It takes a lot of gumption and really believing in yourself. And unless you've done that introspection, that is a hard thing to do, and often people will stay in those relationships longer than they should as they're learning. So, again, let's get back to change. So we can change the relationship, right? We can change these bigger patterns that will essentially loosen up the problem and it'll go away. Or we can change ourselves. We can realize that, wow, I have dysfunctional beliefs about, what relationships should be. I have dysfunctional beliefs about, that this person I love so much, which was kind of my position. I love love. It's kind of my drug of choice. I had an addiction to this person because my life wasn't exciting enough. I hadn't created enough excitement and joy and passion and purpose in my own life to look at this relationship and say, whoa, okay, I'm not going to put all my eggs in that basket. And so, introspection, we can change, a belief that we have about relationships to bring this all back into balance. And again, it requires a change within, an introspective change to be like, okay, I'm going to shift this belief, and that will also loosen the problem. So, comment on this video. What do you think? Share your thoughts. Do you agree with zooming in or out is a good way to control your emotions in a relationship, to really get to the root of the problem as a highly sensitive person? Because relationships are an important part of life for everyone, right? Quality of our relationships often dictates the quality of our life. And so drop a comment below. Let me know what you thought of this video, what your thoughts were. And if you are a highly sensitive person who is struggling with a relationship, who is really having a lot of negative emotion attached to one, please contact me. I have an excellent 2-hour workshop that will help you get some perspective either in or out so that you can shake that problem loose. And I also have a 3-month transformational program that will transform you from someone who feels very flammable, a lot of negative emotion, to becoming a highly sensitive hotshot. So thank you for watching. Hope you have a wonderful weekend. Bye.